Hi, I'm your podcast host, Ashley Turek, and this is your first podcast episode featuring Jeff Briz as we discuss the cost of change in one of California's most beloved cities, San Francisco. Hi, Jeff. Would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ashley. Super excited to be here as your first podcast episode guest. My name is Jeff Briz. I am the Director of Communications at Hamilton Families. Hamilton Families is a nonprofit organization serving families who are experiencing homelessness in San Francisco. Our mission is to end family homelessness in San Francisco. And I oversee all of our external communications, marketing efforts, specifically for our advocacy and fundraising efforts. So I'm very excited to be here with you to chat.
Thank you so much for making the time to be here. Um, let's just dive straight into gentrification, which is the main topic of this podcast. So, the word gentrification gets used a lot, but how would you define it in terms that someone like me, a high school student, would understand?
So, to preface, I am not an expert in the topic of gentrification. It is a topic I am definitely interested in. I have read many books about the subject. I have watched many documentaries, but I do not have a degree in gentrification.
No worries.
So I am sharing what I know from what I've learned and from my own personal experience. But to answer your question, let's all get on the same page and just pull it up.
Yeah.
According to the Oxford Dictionary, gentrification, noun, is the process whereby the character of a poor urban area is changed by wealthier people moving in, improving housing, and attracting new businesses, typically displacing current inhabitants in the process. So that's the official definition. But one visual that I learned reading a book called Homelessness is a Housing Problem 2 years ago, which was an outstanding book, is the visual of musical chairs. So I would imagine most all of you listening have played musical chairs at some point in your life. If for those of you who haven't, basically you have a circle of chairs. Let's say you have 10 chairs and you have 11 players. When you play the music, all the players have to go around the circle, around the chairs. When the music stops, everyone has to get their butt into a seat. Whoever doesn't get a seat loses. That is basically housing and gentrification in a nutshell, on a broader societal level. Now,
Mhm.
if you're playing that game, let's say you have the 10 chairs, 11 players, and then you suddenly have 20 players for the same 10 chairs. What happens? You have more people who lose the game.
Yeah.
But let's say you put in more chairs and you have the 17 chairs for 20 players. Well, less people lose the game. And then hopefully there's enough chairs for everybody.
Right.
That's the ideal scenario, much like housing.
Right. And it's a ongoing process, right? So more chairs, less chairs come in, more people get kicked out, and it just continues, and there's really no ending it for now.
Exactly.
In terms of San Francisco, what are some signs that a neighborhood is starting to gentrify, and what major changes accelerate this process?
So not just San Francisco, but any community you go to, some clear signs of gentrification are rapid increases in rent, not just for individuals, families, but also for businesses. Another sign is rapid changes in demographics. It could be race, ethnicity, age, socioeconomic status, all the above. If there are really quick changes in a population based on those factors, that's a sign of gentrification. And then also like legacy businesses that have been there in specific neighborhoods for many, many years, suddenly going out of business, and then seeing new businesses come in that are able to maybe charge much higher rates. That can be a sign of gentrification. Um, and then some of the causes of gentrification is, like I mentioned at the beginning, like the definition of what gentrification is really an influx of people, an influx of capital into neighborhoods that didn't have that same capital before then. That is what largely causes the issue of gentrification.
And they can't keep up with it, right? I mean, they've been there for longer than these newcomers have, and suddenly prices rise, they get kicked out, and they have nowhere else to go. That's been their home for so long. Okay. Um, are there any specific neighborhoods that have changed the most over the past few decades in San Francisco?
Yeah. So I'm in the Mission District right now. I am on 22nd and Mission in the heart of it.
Mhm.
And the Mission is, I think for the past couple decades, the Mission has been the hotbed of the issue of gentrification. Um, it, just from I know, I would imagine it is because the mission is very centrally located in the city. It's in the heart of the city.
Mhm.
It's easy access to all other neighborhoods from here. The culture here is incredible. It's rich, it's diverse.
Mhm.
The landmarks and parks and architecture here are just stunning and gorgeous. The weather is really good here. And so that's, in my opinion, that's probably why there was a massive influx in development and gentrification here in the Mission
Everything.
for the past 20 years. Even just like right behind me. So if you could see this little, see it, that little plot of land over there?
Yes, yes.
So that right now is becoming a hotbed of gentrification. That used to be a really big apartment that burned
Mhm.
down 10 years ago. There was a fire.
Really?
And now the community has been fighting for the city to basically turn it into affordable housing.
Yeah.
However, the owner of that land does not want to turn it into affordable housing and wants to build market rate housing
Yeah.
with the minimum required by law for affordable units, which is very small.
Mhm.
But the community has been fighting and has been trying to get the property into affordable housing,
Mhm.
but the landlord ultimately has the say and is deciding to build housing here.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's an example. And then another example is over at 16th and Mission at the BART Plaza. That was going to be luxury condos, and the community banded together to fight to turn that into affordable housing, which they did win, and they're now
Nice.
building affordable housing.
Fantastic.
But yeah, those are the types of, I guess, community fights that you'll see in
Yeah.
neighborhoods that deal with gentrification. Another neighborhood that has had a very unfortunate and long history of gentrification is the Fillmore District in Japantown,
Mhm.
specifically after World War II.
Mhm.
Before then, it was a very rich, diverse community. Japantown used to be, I think, 10 to 14 blocks. It
Mhm.
is now, I think, only 4 or 6 blocks, something like that. The Japanese population and the African American Black population have decreased significantly over the past few decades because of gentrification, specifically redlining and redevelopment of those communities. So those are just a couple of examples, and I'm sure there are many more, but those are the more obvious ones that have a long history.
And I'm sure many people like myself, high schoolers, have gone to San Francisco. They've seen these districts with their own eyes. And obviously, there's some murals, like in the Mission District, there's huge, beautiful murals of the culture. And sometimes I've seen some of the portraits on them they like portray gentrification itself and the issue, and that's kind of their voice in their city, reaching out saying like, hey, like we're still here, respect our culture.
Yes,
Um,
100%.
yeah. In terms of specifically who is being affected by gentrification, um, who tends to be the most affected when neighborhoods gentrify in terms of maybe economic status, gender, race, social class, anything?
Yeah, so in present day, generally speaking, it's low income individuals, families who are most impacted by gentrification. I think for the most obvious reason that when prices rise and their wages do not rise, they cannot afford it, therefore must move out. So that's the most simple way of thinking of it. And then in past decades, so for example, Japantown Western Addition, those types of situations, that gentrification was explicitly racist. Japantown with World War II and Japanese internment, and then redlining in the Fillmore, which was basically specifically targeted communities of color based on demographics in that area. In other areas across the country, those were very explicit. But now it's largely an economic issue.
Yeah.
that still impacts communities of color. And here at Hamilton Families specifically, we work with majority of the families that we serve are single parent households, specifically single moms.
Mhm.
And if you think of the economics of that, if a household only has one income, they can only earn so much compared to a dual household
Yeah,
income earning family. So if you think back to that analogy of the musical chairs, it's pretty clear that the probability if you are a single parent with multiple young kids, making minimum wage, the probability you will lose that game of musical chairs is very high. And so
definitely.
that's what we're seeing in real time here.
Yeah. That's a great analogy. It's really easy to
Yeah.
understand. Um, what do you see happening, especially as a member of Hamilton Families, happening to communities when long-term residents are displaced?
What happens to communities when long-term residents are displaced? I think the most obvious thing is that you lose the richness and vibrancy of that community. Again,
Definitely.
going back to the Fillmore, we lost the Fillmore of the West. We lost a lot of it. There was such a rich jazz culture
Hmm.
in the Fillmore that was booming in the 1940s, 1950s.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, almost seemingly out of nowhere, it was gone. um, Japantown as well. Very rich Japanese community dating back all the way to the early 1900s. And again, World War II, that was gone. And now with the mission example that I mentioned, that's what this community is afraid of, is that richness, that vibrancy of the Latinx community um, being gone.
Yeah.
And it's not just the heritage, it's also the relationships, it's also the families, it's also the people that have been here for many generations. Losing that would mean essentially losing the community.
Definitely. And I mean, that's what San Francisco built its name off of was
Yes.
rich cultural diversity. Each unique district houses a specific demographic and a specific community that really finds their place in society there. And when they're displaced, they don't have anywhere to go. It just like ruins the fabrics of these social communities.
100%.
In terms of the tech industry, because it definitely has a big impact on gentrification in San Francisco, how do you see the tech industry affecting housing prices and neighborhoods? Like,
Yeah. Well, one, I don't, let's start by saying that um, no industry is inherently bad or good
yes.
in a way. So, for example, tech. After the 2008 financial crisis, the city of San Francisco was really hurting and trying to recover financially from that crisis that so many people were feeling across the country.
Mhm.
And one of the strategies was to really welcome tech into the city. And what happened was tech came in, and that bolstered a lot of the city's revenues from tax revenues because of tech. And the city was able to do things that it hadn't done before because of that. The unintended consequence of that was gentrification.
Yeah.
Again, going back to that analogy of musical chairs, you had 10 chairs and you basically just brought in 30 or 40 more
Yeah.
players to the game,
I mean, yeah.
aka tech.
It's important to note that no specific industry is directly the culprit behind gentrification, but as you said, it's the unintended consequences of these industries that really have the major impact.
Correct. It's a very complex issue that
Very.
many players are involved in as it relates to gentrification.
Mhm.
So it can't just be one industry, it's multiple at the same time, like you mentioned. But yeah, like what you saw with tech back in the 2010s was this massive influx of people coming into the city,
Yeah,
tons of businesses starting here in the city.
the tech
Um,
boom.
but you can't build enough housing
Yeah.
because we are a 7 by 7 city. You don't
Yeah.
have enough land to build as much housing as you need. Whereas if you were in Texas, you have all the land to build.
I mean,
Here, all
the only way to build is up. You can't go
correct.
anywhere else.
All you can do is build us up. And so naturally, that's going to take a really long time and a lot of willpower. And so what you saw was like we're talking about gentrification.
Thank you for that. Um, Connection to homelessness in San Francisco, which is very well known. I mean, when people think of San Francisco, they think of the homeless people on the streets, but they don't think of how they got there and their
Mhm,
specific stories.
mhm.
So, how do you think that gentrification is specifically connected to family homelessness in San Francisco?
Yeah, okay. So homelessness broadly in San Francisco is another very complex thing.
Yes.
I feel like each subpopulation of folks who are experiencing homelessness in San Francisco have their own unique characteristics.
Mhm.
So I can definitely speak to the family homelessness.
Yes.
Families who are experiencing homelessness in San Francisco, from what we have found, is that majority of them were from San Francisco, were raised in San Francisco,
Mhm.
and ended up becoming homeless in San
Yeah.
Francisco. And so the narrative of all these families, moving in from all over to get services just isn't true. Um, what we have seen is that it's a lot of the families that we're working with are families who have been impacted by poverty for
Mhm.
many generations in San Francisco. And when you put them into the mix of the housing affordability and the whole musical chairs game, it's pretty clear who's going to lose out in that game. And
It's,
that, unfortunately, are the families that we work with.
exactly. And especially families who have been here for so long. I mean, generationally, they grew up in San Francisco. It's like they
Mm.
just lose their home. It's horrible.
Lose their home and lose their community. I
Yes,
think that's
lose
the
their
biggest thing.
entire community. Exactly.
Yes.
Um, what do you see are common situations that cause families to lose their stable housing?
Oh gosh. All types of things. So, on one end of the spectrum are kind of acute shocks that families experience, whether financial hardships, they lose a job, they fall behind because of that. Another one is domestic violence, whether a family is fleeing a domestic violence situation and they become unhoused because of that. We do see that. It could also be newcomer families moving here from other countries who don't have any community at all and have no resources and are fleeing all types of different situations. That's a scenario. And again, largely the folks that we have seen over the past 40 years are these families who are from San Francisco who grew up in severe poverty and are now parents. They were once kids in poverty and now they are parents in poverty.
Yeah,
And now that is the tide that we are trying to turn here at
trying to
Hamilton.
break the cycle of this. Yes.
Exactly.
Um, you mentioned to me before the process of housing these families.
Mm.
Could you go more into depth on how that process lays out?
Yeah. So the process is let's say, for example, a second grade teacher in the school district discovers that one of their students is really struggling in the classroom, socially, emotionally, behaviorally, academically, and the teacher then discovers that it's mostly because the student has been living out of the backseat of their car for several months.
Oh, yeah.
Um, the teacher would then notify, usually the social worker. Social worker notifies what's called a coordinated entry.
Mhm.
And based on the assessment of the family, we would get the call to
Mhm.
step in and intervene for the family. We have three primary programs. One, we have our shelter, a family shelter in the Tenderloin. We have a transitional housing program in the north of the Panhandle, and the housing services program, which you're asking about, is here in the Mission District where I am. And when families come or refer to us to that program, we have a real estate team who is responsible for securing homes on the private rental market with landlords. And if a landlord is open to working with the families that we serve, we'll get them connected with the landlord. We'll support them throughout the whole process, get them into a home, and we will help them pay their rent for anywhere between 1 to 3 years. And usually it's about 60 to 70% of their rent, and then they would cover the rest. And
Mhm.
the goal is by the time they finish that program, that they are stable enough to be able to live in that home or in that community on their own. So that comes with helping them find jobs, helping them connect to benefits,
Mhm.
helping them find childcare, which is a really big one, especially for single parents. And that is the ultimate goal. But now, like I mentioned before, we have this big focus of how do we help these families, yes, get into housing and keep their housing, but how do we get them out of poverty for good? and help them build these really successful futures so that they can come back to the city, or if they've left the city, how can they come back to the city and build successful futures here?
It's great. You're getting them back on their feet again, getting them started, and then hopefully they will go from that and build their own new starting, new beginning.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
What do you see generally? Do you see positive outcomes with this process?
Yeah. For like I mentioned with that whole spectrum, for the families who come to us with like kind of acute shocks in their situation, that those situations where they just need a hand up for extended amount of time or a certain period of time, find great success in the program. On the other end of the spectrum, for families who have the issue of poverty,
Yeah.
those are much trickier and harder to support on a very limited
Mhm.
rental subsidy, like 1 to 3 years. Usually, what we find is that much more is needed in terms of time and resources that just aren't there right now because of funding. And so now we're trying to figure out different, unique, innovative ways to support those families.
Definitely very complex issues. There has to be multiple viewpoints to getting to.
100%.
But yeah. Um, just as we're running close on time, I want to end with a closing question for common high school students.
Yeah.
And it is, if you could help every high school student understand one thing about gentrification in San Francisco, what would it be?
Mm. One thing, okay. Um,
One or two.
it is an incredibly simple thing to understand, but the issue is incredibly complex.
Yes,
It's this weird dichotomy of it being yes and. Um, so yeah, I'll leave it at that.
definitely. That's a great way to put it, honestly. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much for taking the time to explain gentrification, have this discussion. It was really great, and hope to talk again.
Yes, thank you so much, Ashley, and hope everyone learned. I hope I was able to impart some knowledge. So thank you
Yes,
for having me.
I hope so. Thank you so much.
Awesome.